In systematic trading, the exact mechanism that proves a strategy works is the same mechanism that guarantees its eventual destruction. A strategy generates returns, attracts capital, grows in size, and then, at a specific mathematical threshold, it shatters entirely under its own mass. The quantitative finance industry traditionally treats this capacity ceiling as an engineering problem. The assumption is that with a better execution algorithm, faster routing, or access to dark pools, a fund can push past the friction and keep scaling. But a 2026 working paper from MIT researcher Marcus Bergo proves that this assumption is false. Capacity limits for residual-driven strategies are not optimization problems to be solved by better code. They are strict mathematical boundaries. Bergo's paper establishes that for any trading strategy relying on informational advantage, there is a maximum deployable capital threshold, known as K star. This ceiling is dictated by a rigid function of the market's total liquidity, the strategy's information capacity, and the rate at which trades reveal price information. The simple act of exploiting an informational edge inherently consumes that edge. This is a non-negotiable law of market physics that permanently caps how large any single strategy can grow. To understand why, look at the Carnot limit in thermodynamics. Carnot proved no heat engine converts heat to work with 100% efficiency. Friction ensures energy loss. Quantitative trading is identical. As capital scales, market impact acts as friction, causing unavoidable loss, eroding alpha. Carnot's thermodynamic limit applies whether building a steam engine or a modern combustion turbine. Similarly, Bergo's scaling law applies regardless of a trader's execution sophistication. Approaching maximum theoretical efficiency in trading requires infinite patience, entering the market so slowly that you cause zero price impact. But financial signals have a finite half-life. The information expires. If you execute slowly enough to avoid impact, the signal decays before you can capture it. No structural breakthrough can bypass this boundary. The limit is an intrinsic property of the market's available liquidity, not a flaw in the trader's algorithm. Defining the exact mathematical boundary for this capacity ceiling, the K star threshold, requires connecting three previously distinct fields of study: optimal execution, information theory, and market microstructure. The first pillar is the Almgren-Kris optimal execution framework, which defines the exact cost of moving large block orders. Data confirms the square root law of permanent market impact. As order size increases, execution costs grow on a convex curve. Trading 10,000 shares doesn't cost 10 times more than 1,000. The impact penalty is exponentially higher. The second pillar comes from mathematics, information theory, specifically the concept of channel capacity. Developed by Claude Shannon, the channel capacity theorem mathematically bounds the maximum possible growth rate of any strategy. It proves that the benefit you can extract is strictly limited by the mutual information between your signal and the actual market outcome. In residual trading, this informational edge, denoted as alpha, is inherently small, often measuring just 20 to 80 basis points per trade. It is a strictly finite advantage. The final pillar belongs to market microstructure economics, Kyle's lambda. This is the financial equivalent of the quantum observer effect. Measuring the system disturbs it. When a trader executes a buy order, the market reads that flow and adjusts the price. You pay a tax simply for revealing what you know. These three models, the escalating cost of execution, the strictly bounded size of the edge, and the unavoidable revelation of private information, interlock to form a rigid mathematical cage. These forces dictate exactly when order flow scaling must inevitably fail. By combining these pillars, Bergo calculates the precise ceiling using just 4 observable market parameters. We need the asset's average daily volume, its daily volatility, the market-specific impact coefficient, and the net informational edge. This equation shows the expected net return. By subtracting the temporary spread costs and the permanent square root impact costs from the gross alpha and setting it exactly to 0, we find the exact break-even threshold. When we algebraically isolate the capital variable, we derive the Bergo scaling law. The critical capital threshold, K star, equals the asset's price times its volume multiplied by the squared ratio of the net edge to the permanent impact and volatility. The equation reveals extreme sensitivity. Because the capacity scales inversely to the square of the impact coefficient, Even microscopic differences in market liquidity will completely rewrite how much capital a strategy can deploy. For a massive, highly liquid asset like Petrobras preferred shares, the dense volume supports upward of $15 million per trade. But apply the exact same strategy to a mid-cap stock with slightly lower volume and a higher impact coefficient, and that capacity collapses to roughly $300,000. K-star is a deterministic ceiling. Any capital deployed beyond this specific threshold mathematically guarantees a negative expected return. The signal isn't wrong. The scale of the capital simply crushes it. A quantitative professional might argue this limit can be bypassed using execution algorithms. The standard approach is using time-weighted or volume-weighted average price routines, slicing a massive order into hundreds of tiny pieces and spreading them across the trading day to hide the flow. But this introduces a fatal flaw. While dividing the order reduces the immediate per-period price impact, the underlying alpha signal is experiencing exponential decay. The longer you wait to execute the final slice of your order, the weaker the information becomes. A fund can calculate the optimal balance between saving on impact costs and losing value to signal decay. This optimization finds a local maximum, expanding capacity by a factor of 2 or 3, but never unlocking infinite scale. Another attempted workaround is utilizing options contracts. The theory is that buying options provides synthetic leverage, capturing the directional view without generating heavy equity order flow that moves the underlying price. This also fails. Market makers who sell those options immediately hedge their own risk by trading the underlying equity. They transfer your impact right back to the central limit order book. Meanwhile, the options contract bleeds your edge daily through theta decay. Every execution algorithm, every structural innovation, and every alternative routing venue ultimately faces the same math. They can tweak the specific variables within the equation, but they fundamentally cannot break the Bergo law itself. The failure of these workarounds reveals a much deeper structural truth about financial markets. This chart plots the relationship between the net edge and total capital. The mathematical boundary forms a strict zero-sum conservation law. This hyperbola cleanly divides the entire theoretical universe of systematic trading into 2 rigid zones. Operating below the curve yields a profitable strategy. Operating above it guarantees value destruction through market impact. According to Theorem 5.1, the product of a strategy's net edge and the square root of its deployed capital is mathematically bounded by a fixed constant. This constant is defined as the market liquidity quantum. It is a structural budget determined entirely by the physics of the exchange environment, its total volume and volatility. It is completely unaffected by trader skill. The law is strictly fungible. A fund can possess a massive informational edge using a tiny amount of capital, or it can possess a razor-thin edge deployed across massive capital. But the physical structure of the market absolutely forbids possessing both simultaneously. The market liquidity quantum acts as an absolute ceiling. It is the maximum information budget any single entity is allowed to extract from an asset class before the market defends itself. This principle explains the secretive architecture of elite quantitative operations, most notably Renaissance Technologies' Medallion Fund. For decades, Medallion has famously capped its total assets under management at roughly $10 billion, aggressively returning capital to its employees rather than compounding it year after year. They do this because they recognize their aggregate K-star threshold. Because a fund cannot scale vertically by pouring billions of dollars into its best signals without triggering the impact penalty, it must scale horizontally. It achieves that $10 billion capacity by aggregating thousands of faint, independent signals across highly disjointed global markets. This entirely reframes standard efficient market theory. The fact that small, persistent pricing anomalies exist in the market is not a failure of efficiency. It is a state of structural equilibrium. Alpha anomalies persist because they are protected by the market's microstructure. The exact scale of capital required to completely arbitrage them away automatically triggers the physical laws that destroy the trade. The edge survives simply because it is too expensive to consume at scale.